Do Jews actually believe that Jesus is boiling in excrement? No, they don't. Okay, thanks, bye. I'm just kidding. Of course, I'm going to go into all the details right here. This is anti-Semites' favorite passage in the Talmud. It comes from Tractate Gittin 57a, which now that I think about it, actually, I don't know that anti-Semites even know what that means, like Gittin 57a. Do they know what that reference really even means? Outside, because all they do is Google this stuff and then they repeat it like a parrot. So I don't think they actually understand what that reference means. But anyway, this is an interesting passage. And many people completely miss the point of the passage. They only quote the part that they like, completely removing it from its context within the greater portion of this whole passage. Believe it or not, this passage is supposed to be connected to the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, which is actually a story about how and why the temple in Jerusalem is destroyed in 70 AD. And the moral of the story is the reason for the destruction of Jerusalem was for baseless hatred. And this story is actually meant to be in connection with that. The story reads a little bit more like a parable and as a sort of cautionary warning, which is why it's in connection with the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story of the destruction of the temple for baseless hatred. In fact, the story very much reads a lot like Jesus' parable of Lazarus and the rich man. And so you should read it like that. It's a story, it's a parable, it's meant to teach something. It's not meant to be literal at all. And it's only meant to make one point. And once it makes that one point, the parable is done being a parable for any other reason. You're not supposed to draw other conclusions from the parable, just the one point that the parable is helping you to understand. And again, this story is happening in the context of the Kamsa Bar Kamsa destruction of the temple for baseless hatred. So this guy named Onkelos, who is a famous convert to Judaism, and he lived right between the 1st and the 2nd centuries. He was probably born at about 35 AD and lived to about 120. He's famous for having written a Targum of the Torah. Now in this story, Onkelos wants to convert to Judaism. And in this story, he performs necromancy, raising people from the dead to ask them various questions about the Jewish people. First, he raises Emperor Titus, asks him who is the most important people in the world. Titus responds, the Jewish people. He has a short conversation with Titus, who tells him about going to battle against Israel, and when he's asked what is the punishment of that, Titus says he's burned up every day, his ashes are gathered, and they're thrown over the 7 seas every day. Now, even though Titus is the one talking here and the one being addressed by Onkelos, when he asks the question, he says, what is the punishment of that man? I know it's very commonly said that when you see that man, that it's a reference to Yeshua or Jesus, and that's not the case. Remember, this is a story teaching a lesson, and that man is whoever the person is that does these same things. That's what his punishment will look like. So it's universally applicable. You could be that man if you do these things. So next, Onkelos goes and raises Balaam, the prophet, the Gentile prophet, from necromancy, and asks him the same question. Who is the most important? And Balaam says, the Jewish people. He has a short conversation with Balaam. Balaam basically says, you shall not seek their peace or their welfare all the days. Balaam's referring to himself here, by the way. And Onkelos says, what is the punishment of that man? And Balaam says he's boiling in stuff. But now we're to the part everyone cares about. And I just want to show you guys something here real quick. The Talmud, just like the Bible, undergoes textual criticism. There are different copies. All of them read a little differently. So there's a textual criticism on deciding what is more original to the Talmudic literature. A lot of the ones you see online are not textually criticized. They've not been scrutinized, and they are basically part of the commentary. They've inserted words into the text to help with the interpretation of the text, because the text is actually by itself very hard to read. And on many online versions, they insert Jesus' name into the text here. But I have behind me my physical copy of a Gemara from the Schottenstein edition of the Talmud of the page in question. And I think you'll notice, if you pause to read that you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, this raise the sinner, plural, and there's a little footnote. This passage actually reads in the plural, but because of the rest of the passage, they assume that it should be read in the singular, but the Aramaic here is in the plural, and that's what the footnote is addressing. So it's likely that Onkelos has raised from the dead a sinner from Israel, but again, the story can apply to anybody specifically, and it can be that man, right? You could be that man. And so it's reading in the plural, and this might be a textual variant, and that's why. But you'll notice Jesus' name is not anywhere in this passage. That is a later scribal note or inscription or piece of commentary on some rabbi's opinion on who the sinner of Israel might be. But the story and the original documents don't mention his name at all. And for any of my Aramaic Hebrew scholars out there, here's the original passage in question from my physical Gemara. And if you can find Yeshua's name in here, let me know. But I can read it, and I know it's not there. The highlighted portion is the beginning of the section in question. It goes all the way until here. And another thing I want to note is everything not in bold is added. It's interpretive to help you with the reading, but only the bolded text is actually being translated. And he asks him, this person, who is the most important in the world? And the answer, the Jewish people. Onkelos says, should I convert? This person says, the welfare you shall seek, their misfortune you shall not seek, for anyone who touches them is regarded as if he touched the apple of his eye. You bringing harm to Israel is like trying to poke someone's eye out, like violently. It's more of a euphemistic phrase. What is the punishment of that man? Same exact phrase. This is not a specific euphemism for Jesus. It is a phrase that is used for whoever he's addressing. And for the purpose of this parable, it's meant to teach that you can be that man. It can be anybody. That man, whoever is the one doing these things, this is the punishment of that man. And then we get the famous boiling in excrement passage. And then the story concludes. The actual conclusion of the story, it is taught, Rabbi Eliezer says, come and see how great is the power of shame. For the Holy One, blessed be he, assisted Bar Kamsa, who had been humiliated, and due to his humiliation and shame, he destroyed his temple and burned his sanctuary. So even if it's Jesus, which it's not, he's not named, he's not mentioned, but even if it is, the story is a parable. Just like Lazarus and the rich man, these are not real people we're talking about. This is a parable meant to make a point. Now, Onkelos would eventually go on to convert and be one of the most famous converts in Jewish history. But the real issue being addressed here is actually with the last person who is resurrected and asked the same question. You see, it appears that the first two people gave the advice to Onkelos to not join with the Jewish people and to oppress them in many various ways. But in the third person, who was an Israelite, a fellow Israelite, a sinner of some sinner in Israel, he gave him positive advice and issued a warning if you don't follow that advice. Unfortunately, in the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, that warning was not heeded. And so they're saying that part of the reason for the destruction of the temple was this is good advice, and we didn't take it. And this is evident with the final comment from the Gemara before it goes into the Baraisa, which says, come and see the difference between the sinners of Israel and the prophets of the nations of the world. As Bilam, who is a prophet, wished Israel harm, whereas the sinners of Israel sought their well-being. And the key difference, though, is that outside oppression will not destroy Israel, but inside oppression will. Baseless hatred, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The only people capable of destroying Israel is itself. That's the point of the lesson here. And of course, even then, the destruction is not final. There's still the promise, the messianic age to come, the restoration of all things. But this passage is meant to teach you that the reason the temple is gone, that the reason they don't live in the land of Israel, that God is not sovereign over its land and there's no Davidic reign and all of that, the reason for that was the infighting within Judaism and the baseless hatred. That is the purpose of this passage. It is not meant to be a reflection of a theological idea for the Jewish people. Even if it's Jesus, and it's not meant to say that Jesus is boiling in excrement, and that the Jewish people believe that because the Talmud says it. No, this is a parable. And sure, some rabbis in the past have said that they think Jesus is the man being talked about in this particular parable. Let me assure you that's the minority opinion, and one that has been largely debunked by the other textual variants due to textual criticism. And because of the nature of the parable and the lesson it's trying to teach, it really doesn't make sense for it to be Jesus in the parable at all. And again, the most authoritative text on the Gemara, the Schottenstein edition Bavli Talmud, he's not there. And the whole point of the message, no baseless hatred. Baseless love is the answer. Ahavas Chinam. I'm going to tag them in the video too, because there is an organization called Ahavas Chinam. But now you know. Save this video, send it to all your anti-Semitic friends, stop perpetuating the lie, and focus on the meaning of the parable to begin with. Stop hating each other baselessly. Shalom.